Hello and welcome to tradingfloor.com's market overview. It's shaping up to be an interesting week this week. We have more tensions in the Middle East. In Japan we have concern about debt following a recent downgrade, and in Germany there's focus on politics there, and in Ireland. With me this week we have Mads Kofoed, macro strategist of Saxo Bank, to discuss some of these events. Mads, if we look at Germany, earlier this week Chancellor Angela Merkel saw a disappointing result in Hamburg from the elections there. Is this likely to have an impact on the way the sovereign debt situation will be handled in the Eurozone?
Well, you're certainly right when you say there was a horrible result. Her party lost roughly half of their votes, while the opponent, the Social Democrats, gained roughly 50% of the votes according to the exit polls. So they are now in a majority all by themselves. And it's interesting that this happened in one of the more affluent regions of Germany, where you perhaps would expect Merkel's party to have the upper hand. The question is whether this is entirely due to the fact that the German voters are angry with having to fund the bill for bailing out other countries in the Eurozone. And I think we still need a couple of more regional results before we can make that statement. But it's certainly a poor result and a poor indication if it continues.
Later in the week there'll be elections in Ireland. How important is this event, considering the fact that Ireland is in a recession?
Well, it is quite important because they could ultimately decide to default on the bailout package that was agreed by the earlier government. But the question is whether that will happen, depending on whether it will be the Labour Party or the Fine Gael Party that takes over. It seems as if both sides are now thinking about continuing to stay in the bailout program. And that's also due to the fact that it looks as though the new bailout fund that will come into existence sometime this year, likely in the March summit, will have lower interest rates for the countries that are bailed out. So it'll be more agreeable to countries like Ireland. So now it looks like they'll stay in the bailout program instead of restructuring their debt.
Mm-hmm. And in Japan, we've seen Moody's downgrade debt there. What is the impact for Japan, and are there likely to be any spillover effects to other leveraged countries?
Well, on the longer term, our position is unchanged. Japan and many other governments are on completely unstable trajectories, borrowing too much, and Japan has, of course, the highest debt-to-GDP ratio of any developed country. What Japan has, or had, it's starting to disappear now, was wealthy domestic buyers of their debt, something that the US and other governments do not have to the same extent. So that has been helping the Japanese government funding their bonds. But that's now starting to, there are not as many savers in Japan anymore, so they have to increasingly turn to foreign buyers of their bonds. But these are all long-term, long into the future, and that's of course where we'll see trouble. This downgrade to a negative outlook, it will rumble the markets for a day or two, but other than that, I don't think it will affect markets.
And if we to focus on pure data out this week, what are likely to be the major draw cards?
Well, of course, we have a lot of unrest in Libya, and we have this Japan story and so on, the earthquake in New Zealand, so plenty of things happening. And in addition to that, tomorrow on Wednesday we have the minutes from the latest Bank of England meeting, and it'll be interesting to see if they are turning more hawkish, because of course inflation continues to remain very elevated in the UK, and the governor, Mervyn King, has to repeatedly write to the Treasury why it remains elevated. And our position has for a long time been that they'll not change the rates this year, but perhaps they are turning hawkish sooner than we originally expected. Let's see about that.
Thanks very much for this interesting outlook, Mads. Don't forget you can read more about what he's talking about in the markets on tradingfloor.com, and you can also follow him on twitter.com/Mads Kofoed.